How excited are you to have Sterling on board as yet another Lockett here coming to K-State?
Oh well, I'm pretty excited. I mean, it's a good opportunity for him. It's a great fit, and we always wanted it to obviously be his decision. But I'm glad that he landed in the place that we all thought should have been home for him.
Did you feel like this was going to be the outcome all along?
Yeah, I did. But just like with Tyler, we wanted to make sure that he was able to go through the process and ultimately that it was going to be his decision and that he would make that decision at the time that seemed appropriate for him. And so I think he just got to a point where after conversations, not only with K-State, but with about 5 or 6 other universities, I think it just became very, very clear to him that K-State was not only a place for him because of his familiarity with the university, but also because of just the fit both on the field and off the field as well.
Kevin Lockett talking with me here on Wildcat Insider. So what other options were being seriously considered by you guys in Sterling?
So what's interesting is he's actually being recruited pretty heavily from the Ivy League schools. And so there were some other, call them, sort of mid-Power 5 kind of schools, so Nebraska, Iowa State, University of Iowa. None of them had made offers, but they were in heavy discussion. But then the group that was really intriguing, I think, for a little bit to Sterling at one point was the Ivy League. So Columbia, Yale, and Harvard as well. And I think that was more just because, and they'll learn this about Sterling, he's a very thoughtful young man, well beyond his years. And I think he's looking at life after football already and thinking that, wow, if I graduate from a Columbia or a Princeton or a Yale or a Harvard, that really sets me up for great opportunities in life. But ultimately, what it came down to is K-State was the first to jump out there and say, hey, we believe in you enough to make an offer. A lot of these other schools are sort of kind of hanging or waiting in the balance. And even with COVID going on and everything, K-State felt comfortable enough that he was the right fit for their 2020 class.
Well, it's interesting that you say that about the personality of Sterling, because I would tell you, and I've said before, I think Tyler was as thoughtful a guy as I have covered in my time covering K-State. Would you say that their personalities are pretty similar in that regard?
Somewhat. I would say Sterling is probably a little bit more of a football guy than Tyler was. I think Tyler was very thoughtful from sort of a holistic standpoint. Tyler was very creative, and you've seen that now with his poems and his book and all those kind of things. I think Sterling is a little bit more studious, and that's both from a football perspective and from a school perspective. And so, obviously, to get into an Ivy League school, you've got to have incredible grades. And so I think he's carrying a 4.2 something grade point average right now. And so I would say that he's just thoughtful in a little bit of a different way. But I also think that when you talk about from a football perspective, yes, they're very similar. Very smart players, understand how to break down a defense well beyond their years in terms of understanding what the defense is trying to take away from the offense and ultimately understanding where the holes are in a defense based on the types of coverages that they're playing.
So if we're talking from an attribute standpoint, what kind of a football player he is actually on the field, how does he compare to Tyler, to you, to Aaron? You guys obviously had differing sorts of skill sets. Where does Sterling come into play here?
Yeah, so I think he's probably more like me than any of the other two. He's built a lot like me. He's about 5'11". He's probably about 160 pounds right now, so he's a little bit taller, a little bit longer. He's got really long arms. He's got what I would consider to be a pretty big catch radius, so he gets the balls that are sort of not directly thrown at him, but sort of wide range. But he's also pretty smart as well. And so what we're working on is, can we get him to be as elusive as Tyler was, as good of a route runner as Tyler was, but also have game-breaking speed like Aaron had. So he's probably got more of my characteristics than the other two, but you will definitely see at some point in time some parts of Tyler and Aaron's game when you watch it.
Do you feel like physically, and Kevin Lockett is talking with me, physically, is he in a similar spot to where Tyler was at this stage in his career, just from a size standpoint?
Yeah, he's almost exactly where he was. When Tyler first got on campus, I think at K-State, Tyler might have been about 164, 65 pounds. Sterling, what we're working to do is to see, can we get him to about 175 pounds before he's got to step on campus in the summer of 21 or summer of 22. So, he's got about 15, 16 pounds to go, so he's working hard in the weight room. But yeah, built a lot like Tyler, and is very, very similar in skill set to where Tyler was at this point in time. Very good route runner, needs to work on getting to be a little bit more explosive. That'll come by getting stronger in the weight room, but has really good hands like Tyler did as well.
You're somebody that watches, I know, the games, and you're a fan and an alum. Plus, now you have the perspective of what is being sold by the coaching staff from having a son who's being recruited. After what was a tough end of the season last year, how do you feel about the direction of the program and where it's going under Chris Kleiman right now?
Yeah, so obviously we wouldn't have made this decision had we not felt good about the direction of the program. I think anytime you take a step back, you've got to understand that when you've got a new group of coaches that come in and they bring their way of doing things, there's always a little bit of a weeding out process that's going to take place. And I think that's what you've seen a little bit over the last couple of months. You've seen players jumping into the portal. They don't think that this fits them in terms of the culture and the style. Sometimes it's off the field issues. And so I think that's sort of that weeding out process that really happened back in '88 when Snyder walked on campus. It was sort of who's going to do it our way and who's not. And so, once everyone on campus gets to learn a little bit about Sterling, what they'll learn is he's a kid like Tyler. He does things the right way. He shows up every day and puts his hard hat on and just goes to work, doesn't believe in quitting, fights for a spot. And so I think those are the type of kids that are going to grow and flourish in this Kleiman era. And so that's why we really thought it was a really good fit for him. But there'd also be the potential that maybe he could play early in his career when you see all those kids that are exiting and jumping into the portal.
Kevin Lockett talking with me. And all the times I've talked to you, I can't remember if I'd ever asked you this, but what was the recruiting process like for you when you were coming out, and who finished second to K-State?
Yeah, so Missouri actually finished second, and so I had a handful of offers, not a ton either. We were all very similar in that I had Oklahoma State, I had Missouri, and I had K-State. But I had gone on a recruiting trip to Missouri. Bob Stoll was the head coach. Really enjoyed my time down there, but just really didn't gel very well with Bob Stoll as the head coach. And then I come on campus a week later in Manhattan, and just a complete opposite experience. Everybody knew me. I got an opportunity to spend time with professors in the business school. They knew who I were. Coach Snyder knew every detail about me, my family, and my sibling. And so it was just truly that feeling of family. And so I made the decision a couple of days after I left that recruiting trip to attend K-State, and so Missouri finished second.
Okay. Maybe I did know that. I don't know. Some of that started to come back to me as I heard it, but a good story nonetheless. What's it been like watching Tyler and everything he's done this year with the Seahawks? I'm sure nothing amazes you at this point with how his career has progressed, but this seems to have even been another step.
Yeah, he just continues to grow, and I think what I saw this year was more growth, not only just from a statistical perspective, but really growth in his game. He had been sort of a home run guy since he had gotten into the NFL, real big play guy, and this year he ended up with the same amount of yards that he had last year receiving, but he did it on about 20 more catches. So what you saw this year was he was a lot more consistent. He ran a lot of routes that were underneath, a lot of those tougher routes in the middle in terms of going across the middle at 8 and 10 yards where he's got to catch it in traffic. And so just a different level of his game. And so every year he comes in with a different focus. And this year he was able to adapt to what the team needed him to do, with DK being able to be a big physical specimen on the outside that could go deep. He was able to control sort of the underneath and the middle part of the field from the slot.
Well, Kevin, the last question I have for you is perhaps the most important here, and that is, have the sixth-grade twins been offered scholarships yet by Chris Kleiman?
Not yet, but whenever you see them, 99% of the time you see them, they'll have on a K-State flat bill and a K-State hoodie. So, who knows? If that were to happen, it'd be pretty cool because Sterling would be there probably from 2022 to 2027, and they graduate 2027. So you could have two more walking on campus as Sterling walks off campus, and they'd be there for another 5 years.